What is going on, everyone? Tim from Tierfon Orbital. So today I would like to go over a little bit of an in-depth walkthrough on an install commission that I completed on a Korbanth SKv3. So this was quite not a long project, but there was a lot of modifications that went into this hilt and install. The particular customer for this project had a lot of requests, had a vision about what they wanted to accomplish for the end result of this hilt. So I was happy to oblige, right? There was I had a lot of fun doing both the chassis design for this one as well as some of the body modifications. So I do want to come into Fusion and talk about the chassis. This is a Tierfon magical mystery, incredible surprise master hybrid chassis. So I want to come into Fusion and talk about that, and then we will come up top and talk a little bit in depth about how to use the hilt. We'll talk about the chassis, and then we will put a blade in it. We'll talk about the body modifications as well, because there are some additions to the crystal chamber as well as the grip, and then we'll put a blade in it and we will be on our way, right? So let's come into Fusion. All right, so here it is. As you can see, this is a Tierfon hybrid, magical, incredible, master, special. I mean, how many more adjectives can I think of? All right, so this is, I call these hybrid chassis. They're a mixture of MJF, nylon, and brass. Just essentially, that's all they are, right? When you really boil down to it, all it is a brass battery cover and board cover and just some brass greeblies. Really is all it is. But I have a lot of fun doing these, and I enjoy offering these as an option to folks when they want installs from me, right? So the customer for this particular install wanted this to be a Showcase SK, and they definitely wanted to have a hybrid chassis from me. So I had a lot of fun doing this particular one, right? So let's start with, let's start with the body of the main chassis itself. So something that is interesting about the Korbanth SK is that the inside of the grip steps down from one internal diameter to a smaller one. So this main compartment here, like where the battery is one internal diameter, and then it steps down to a little bit smaller, to 28 millimeters where the speaker is. So I had to accommodate for that in the chassis, right? So that's why you see some of these different cutouts in the battery cover, and that's why it steps down here, right? So I had to accommodate for that. But that's pretty much it. I mean, here is the battery cover, a lot of greebly work on that, some ridges, some vents, and the same thing with the board cover, okay? Something that I've mentioned, I have got to get better with navigating in Fusion. This is awful. I know I probably make people sick when I'm navigating in Fusion. So I think I've mentioned this in previous videos when I walk through my hybrid chassis. So listen, not taking away from some of the other makers out there and designers, like chassis designers that use magnets to hold components in place. I just am not a fan of small magnets. I'm not a fan of 2 millimeter magnets. I'm not a fan of 3 millimeter magnets, to be completely honest with you. They're small, they get lost. If you are not paying attention and you flip your polarity, which it happens, I've done it before, you've got to dig your magnets out of the chassis, or you've got to dig them out of the brass part. They're just a pain, right? They're a huge pain. So I try, when I do these chassis, I try to design for large rectangular neodymium magnets, right? So I've got large sized rectangular thick neodymium magnets on the chassis side, and that way on the actual component side, like the battery cover side, I can get a smaller, thinner magnet and still get enough of a pull, enough of a strength to hold that battery cover in place. I'm really, really happy with the amount of strength I get with those, right? I just do not like messing around with small magnets. And to be honest with you, you know, they're really not that strong. When you start getting down to like 2mm magnets, even if you're putting like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 magnets along this side of the chassis, it's still not strong enough when you've got a big battery cover like this, in my opinion. I mean, I've done plenty of them and they're just like, they don't seem like they're strong enough, right? So I like using bigger magnets whenever I can. Excuse me. So that is the battery cover. All right. As we come around the other side, here is the Profi board cover. Same thing with the Profi board cover. I do have rectangular magnets holding these in place. I do have a smaller rectangular magnet on this end because I couldn't get the same depth as I did with these thicker magnets here because of this kill switch. There was just not enough clearance. But I was okay with that because of the lighter weight of this Profi board cover, right? There is a notch in this cover as well, so you can access the kill switch with the cover in place, right? I don't much see a need. I don't see the point in having a board cover with a kill switch in here if you can't access it. Like, what's the point of having it, right? So I have the ease of access to get to that kill switch if you want to, okay? Profi board does kind of slide up underneath that lip. You can, however, slide it forward and get access to that USB port and SD card if you need to. I did add, of course, just some light greebly work and ridges and holes along each side of the chassis. And I did also add 2 rectangular LEDs. I mean, this is slowly becoming something of a signature for me. I've mentioned this numerous times in my most recent videos, where I'm just trying to getting back to just a little bit more tasteful LED accents on chassis. Again, this is not taking away from folks that want NeoPixels on their chassis. If you want to signal aircraft, you know, if you want to signal the International Space Station from your chassis, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. In fact, I've done that. Those who know me know that I've done plenty of chassis designs. I still have chassis designs with NeoPixels on them. But I want to start getting away from that. I want to start moving into just a more of a subdued, like tasteful in-universe feel, which is, less is more idea of lights on a chassis, if you will, right? I did do some very, very simple vents that are just E6000 to the side of the lower part of the chassis around the speaker, or just above the speaker rather. And at the bottom here, we have a 28mm dark side bass speaker from Smuggler's Outpost. Okay. And that is it. So with this particular version of the SK from Korbanth, there are holes for threaded rod in just below the wasp waist of the hilt. I did account for that. There are some very, very short threaded rod just to help with securing that chassis, just to help, just to give it a little bit more bite to the upper part of the hilt, right? Because we do have such a thin nipple holding that chassis in place, right? So I like doing that just to give it a little bit more extra grab to the upper part of the hilt. And that is it. Super proud and happy with how this one came out, right? All of the brass, well, we'll talk about this when we come up top. All the brass was weathered. I feel like I did this. Well, let's come up top. Let's talk about it. Let's come up top. All right, so here it is. This is the SKv3 from Korbanth lightsabers, okay? This does not come as you see it from Korbanth. There are a number of different modifications that have been made to this hilt that were at the request of the customer. Okay, so I'm going to start at the bottom and make my way up, and then we will talk about the chassis and we'll put a battery in it and do all that good stuff, right? So the first thing I did was do a pass of aluminum black on this whole hilt. The hilt comes disassembled. Well, I'm sorry. The hilt comes without the ribs on the grip, right? So I knocked back all of the edges on these ribs just to make it look like it had been used a little bit. Then I did my pass of aluminum black on all of it, the whole hilt. Sorry, prior to doing that, let me back up. I also knocked back some of the anodization on all of these black edges, right? Just to make it look like it's, again, to make it look like it's been used and knocked around a little bit. There are some scratches, light scratches everywhere, okay? Then I went and did my pass of aluminum black. Took off the shroud, took off all of the greeblies, like the knurled thumb screw, took off this red button, took off the bunny ears, took everything off, disassembled the whole thing, did my pass of aluminum black and scuffing. I did a couple of applications of aluminum black, actually, because some of the parts of this hilt have different levels of, how do I explain this? I've noticed this with this version of the SK from Korbanth. It's almost as if they're different quality of aluminum in some of these parts. Like this pommel, it's almost like there is a clear anodization on this pommel. I always have a lot of trouble getting this pommel to take aluminum black. I've got to really scuff this up with a scouring pad to get it to take aluminum black and get it to, dull up, right? So I did that, aluminum black, the whole thing. Okay. The customer requested a copper bar or copper in the grip. Okay, this doesn't come stock with the SKv3. The SKv2 from Korbanth had copper in the grip. I'm not quite sure why that was not carried over to the SKv3. That's something that I really, really liked about the V2. But the customer wanted copper in the grip. So this is just a simple copper bar that I heat treated and weathered. Okay. And that has been attached. The CoverTech wheel was weathered, and by weathering I mean it was just scuffed up. Okay, it is attached with a black lug that is threaded into the body of the grip, so you can take that off if you want to, you the customer. Okay. The customer also requested a Graflex clamp in the grip. Now this is something I don't think I've ever done that. Well, I don't think I've done this in a long time. And doing this is a little bit tricky. Okay, you have to. It takes 2 Graflex clamps to do this, and you've got to make sure that you are cutting them in the right spot, because you do have holes in very specific spots in the Graflex clamp. So I took a pair of tin snips to a couple of Graflex clamps, and then ground down the edges just to make sure everything fit correctly, and then they were epoxied into place. Okay, before I epoxied them, obviously I heat stained the edges, and I'm super happy with how that came out. All right, that was I can't remember the last time I did this. I'm not sure that I've ever done this. I think I might have done this as a replacement. I think I might have replaced like 1 or 2 panels like this before on a scrap build, but it's just been so long. It had been so long since I'd done this. So it's a little nerve-wracking doing this, because you don't want to ruin in more than one Graflex clamp, because they're like $50 from like $50 from Roman Props. And I only have like 3 or 4 of them here in stock. So anyway, happy with how that came out. Making our way up, we have our wasp waist. A lot of people don't like the wasp waist. Every time, without fail, man, every time I post, I happen to like the wasp waist on this version of the SK. There are some people that just cannot stand the wasp waist. I mean, I get comments about, it breaking. There's, I have never ever seen one of these break, and the builds that I do, I really hope that people are not dueling with these hilts. I like the wasp waist. Korbanth also includes a clamp that clamshells over this wasp waist. So to you, the customer, should you want to add that for both aesthetic or just like to help shore up that wasp waist, it is included in the box as well, if you want to, right? But I like the way that the wasp waist looks. Okay. but it really doesn't matter what I think, right? So anyway, making our way up, let's talk about this crystal chamber. So this upper and lower crystal chamber module, this brass, was from Shtok's Shtok Custom Works Shapeways. Unfortunately, Shapeways has gone bankrupt and is no longer in existence. So I am not sure moving forward where these are going to be available. I'm assuming, like most makers, like myself, all of my brass parts I offer from my store. Like I source them elsewhere. I've never gone through Shapeways. I feel like Shapeways has been overpriced. So I'm assuming that Dimitri will be offering these through his own website, or I'm assuming that's what he's going to do, because these are great crystal chamber modules. They're very, very well designed. I think they're beautiful, honestly, and they look great in an SK. They look great in. I've seen them in V2s and Mark 1, like Rudy Pando chambers. They look great. They're just a very, very beautiful module. So I'm hoping that he probably will, go through a different precious metal printing company, right? But that's what is in that crystal chamber. And those are mounted with FDM printed mounts that I designed that they are sitting on. And those mounts have a neopixel in each. Okay. The lower one has a regular cloudy quartz point. The upper module has a smaller rose quartz point, right? So I wanted to give it a little bit of contrast with two crystals pointing at one another. Okay. The bars in front of the crystal chamber have been replaced. So the stock bars that come from Korbanth are anodized. They have an anodized orange one and an anodized regular silver. These have been replaced with steel bars that I have heat stained. Okay. And then making our way up, that is it, right? The brass pins have been weathered. All of the hardware has been heat stained, right? So all of this hardware is steel hardware. It's been removed and heat stained. And that's it. Okay. So let's get at this chassis. Unthread that grip. So here is the chassis. All right. Really, really happy with how this chassis came out. All right. So there's that battery cover. So those big chunky magnets. Okay, that's cool. So those big chunky magnets are nice and strong. Okay. And there is that battery cover, or the board cover rather. So let's get a battery. Actually, I have one right here. Spring side is your negative. You want to put the flat part of your battery down towards the speaker. Let's hit our kill switch.
As long as she lives, I will always control you.
Okay. So then you can put your covers back on.
And that team is ready for launch.
Let's go back one.
I let you.
I believe this is an SK font that was sent to me by the customer. There's that crystal chamber and those two rectangular LEDs lit. Okay, so once you get your battery in, you are good to go. I do like that we get some light shine through from those LEDs through that Graflex clamp. Let's see what else we put on here. Actually, let's come down to the bottom. All right. So there is that Shtok crystal chamber. I do like that we get a little bit of shine through in that grip. Okay.
The NASA team is ready for launch.
Let's put a blade in it. So something I find to be very handy with this version of Korbanths SK is that, well, this is a 1-inch blade holder, by the way, but the bunny ears, the top screw is a little bit longer than the bottom. So that will serve as your blade retention. So you want to tighten that once you get your blade in, and you are good to go. What you got in here?
Chimere?
So to the customer, you did send a font package with some font requests. So I was able to oblige. So what else we got?
Crystal focus.
There's that crystal chamber. One more. So try to put different animation in that crystal chamber for some of the fonts. One more.
Smooth fuzz. Smooth, smooth.
So that is it. That is the SKv3 from Korbanth that has been decked out with a Shtok crystal chamber module and a Tierfon orbital hybrid chassis. This one was a lot of fun to do. I always like doing intricate projects like this. So to the customer, thank you very much for trusting me with your build. I know this one is going to be a very, very special part of your collection. So I'm very grateful that you chose me to do this one. It was a pleasure working with you. If anyone has any questions about this particular build, please do not be a stranger. I have added this particular chassis to my online chassis index. I've added a section with my hybrid chassis so they're easier to find. A bunch of folks have been asking for that. So if anyone is interested in this one, it's there for purchase. And that's pretty much it. So thank you very much, everyone, for the support. Thank you for watching. And with that being said, may the force be with you. Always have a good one, everybody.